Good evening, TDN listeners and viewers. Welcome to this week in interview with your host, Anthony Drago. It is always a pleasure to join you on a Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It is 9 p.m. Atlantic Time in Dominica. So welcome, welcome, welcome. I want to say that I hope you're having a good week. To all my regular listeners, thank you for coming back every week. I really appreciate the fact that you come back every week to spend this time with me. And if tonight is the first time that you're listening to this week in interview, welcome as well. I hope that you like what you hear enough to also become a regular listener to this week in interview. Say good night to our listeners in Dominica, and viewers as well. They listen on DigiPlay channel 59 through our affiliate station, RVR Jams. RVR Jams Radio is an online radio station, and that provides information and entertainment to Dominica, and they are on DigiPlay channel 59. Check them out. I invite you to share the live, invite 5 people to tune in to this week in interview. You know what we say on here, the way we say it is different from how it's said everywhere else. If you celebrated your birthday in the last week or so, happy birthday to you. I know we missed a couple of people who celebrated their independence. So if you celebrated your independence during the month of November, like Dominica did, I want to wish you and your country all the best. Dominica changed on November 6th. Because on November 6th, 2022, we woke up to news of flooding in Dominica and some of the other islands like St. Lucia and so. But especially for me, I'm from the east coast of Dominica. All through Sunday, we were watching scenes, horrible scenes of flooding and landslides, loss of property. There was one report of a loss of life, but that turned out that he did escape. Pidit Sufria did have one person who lost their life. Condolences to that family. And while we were watching that, and we were horrified, because never mind that the rain was not created by us, the impact of the rain was created by us in terms of our poor management, land use management, doing construction in the wrong way, building in the wrong places, and all of those things. And so when it rained like that, we had a lot of flooding. We saw that we lost so much soil. If you listened last week to last week's program, World Soils Day was on Monday, 2 days ago. On Monday, Monday was Tuesday was the 6th, or Monday was the 5th. World Soils Day. You heard from Dr. Lloyd and Dr. St. Luce about the impact that mismanagement of our soils can have on our food supply, or water supply, or air quality. And so every time you see it rains and our rivers are running brown, we have to question that. And so when we saw that happening on the 6th of November, we were horrified and concerned, because there were so many people who had near escapes, harrowing escapes from being swept away by landslide and by flooding. But that was not the biggest event of November 6th, because sometime in the afternoon we heard that Roosevelt Skerry, the Prime Minister of Dominica, said he had to address the nation at 8 p.m. And so everybody was anticipating that he was going to be talking about the disaster that's happening in the east side of Dominica. So they tuned in and found out that, lo and behold, the Prime Minister was announcing that he was going to put the country through an election, and not an election that was months away, an election 30 days away from that date. And there were so many reactions to that, but chief among that reaction was the cry that we were going to go through one more election without electoral reform. And they call it electoral reform, but I like to call it enforcement of the existing electoral rules. Because talking about cleaning the electors list and verifying voters and making the process more fair and democratic is not electoral reform. There are already laws on the books that manage that for years. And so there was an outcry, there was a boycott by the opposition, main opposition parties. Then we had nomination there on the 18th. Some individuals stood up and ran as independent because they learned that if there were any seats that were not contested, would automatically be declared victory for whoever it is that was nominated. And since it was anticipated that the Labour Party was going to nominate 21 candidates in all 21 seats, some independent people stood up and got themselves nominated so that on 19th of November, the Labour Party could not declare that they were going to form the government. We saw some resistance, we saw some meetings, we saw fits and stats in the forces that oppose the election and the concept of the election under the existing conditions. But eventually, yesterday, there were elections. There were 5 seats that were not contested, so those were automatically declared to the Labour Party. And then the other seats were in contention. 16 seats were contested, out of which the Labour Party won 14, and 2 independent candidates won their seats. So I want to explore some of the stories, some of the threads that come through that scenario. Talk about the need for electoral reform in its true sense. It really interrogates the Prime Minister's right and privilege to call elections at any time he chooses to. Things like that is what a reform would involve. We saw an obscene amount of money being spent in 1 month on an election that the incumbent party was almost sure to win. We saw a lot of questioning of the Constitution and so on. And so I wanted to talk about that tonight and some of the consequences of that experience. How do we deal with it as a nation? How, what lessons there are to learn, both on the government side and on the opposition side from a Dominican standpoint. And so that is the topic of discussion on This Week in Interview tonight. I want to talk about it's almost like a post-mortem of not just the elections itself, but the process leading to the elections, the reaction of the various sectors of the public to the announcement of a snap election. And now that we've had the election, some people say it was a sham, some people say it was illegitimate. Nobody said it was illegal, except me. I think it was illegal. But let's discuss the elections, and will take your comments. But I have invited my good friend, very very experienced, very articulate gentleman. He's no stranger to you. Mr. Alvin Thomas is joining me in the discussion tonight, and so I want you to give him a warm welcome. I'm going to skip the CARICOM anthem and all of that because I want us to have maximum time to discuss the issue. So Alvin, let's bring Alvin up on the screen. Good evening, Alvin. You're part of the family, so welcome back.
Yes, Tony, good evening, good evening. It's always a pleasure, a privilege, and I would dare say an honor to share that platform with you and to dialogue with our many persons that are logged in on the various platforms, Facebook, YouTube,
yes.
TDN. So thank you for inviting me again. You've pretty much set the tone for conversation this evening. It's about what? It's almost 70 degrees. Should I say unfortunately or fortunately in Atlanta? So I can't say we're having a fireside conversation because it's not cold. It's pretty
cold.
nice today. But I see this as a conversation, and always happy to be a part of that. It's a broad conversation, and of course, although one of the, should I say, the central theme, if I may use that word, has to do with the elections. I think there is much broader implications in what is happening in Dominica, and I think it encapsulates what one might call a democracy. And I will as we get into the discussion, I will draw some references in terms of what I mean by our democracy,
Mm-hmm.
and how that, in my view, is even much bigger than the whole question of the elections per se, which is just one aspect, a major aspect, I would say, of our democracy. But I think more fundamental than that is where our democracy as a young nation is going. And
Yes.
if we don't take stock, I'm afraid we may be heading in a complete different direction.
Yeah, Alvin. I agree with you. And I mean, it's ambitious to try to handle it in an hour. But we're going to try to
Yes,
unpack some of the more salient
yes.
points. We can touch on them. I like to say I have some of the most educated folks among my viewers and listeners. And by the way, share it, folks. If you're not on Facebook, you can find us on tdntv.net, so you can see handsome Mr. Alvin Thomas. You can see his face. You can also find us on YouTube. YouTube, look for TDN Network One on YouTube, and the other platforms. Some of it gives me a hard time that I don't say them, but the people that know of Roku and Instagram
They
and
know they
Twitter,
know where to
they,
find
they,
it.
they will find it. They will find it. They know how to
The
search
young
for it
folks,
and
they know how
find
to
it.
find it.
Exactly. But we're on all the major multimedia social media platforms. Of course, we are on Facebook Live on This Week in Interview Facebook page and TDN Radio Facebook page. So I encourage folks to share it, because share the live, invite people to tune in, because what we'll be talking about today, you probably would not hear that type of discussion on the other popular media. For one thing, we don't take calls because I think calls are a little bit distracting, especially if you have
Mm-hmm.
an hour. But we take your comments. If you're on Facebook and you make a comment, we bring it up and we incorporate it into the conversation. So Alvin, as I was laying it out, on the 6th of November, when some of people like me were worrying about our property and on our loved ones. In what has been shown to be one of among the most disastrous natural experiences in Dominica. It's not as bad as Maria because it's not island wide, or Tropical Storm Erika because it's not island wide, but the entire East Coast. I'm hearing reports that some of the roads are so bad that they may have to be abandoned and new routes has to be found. And we know in Dominica that's not easy. The road to Pilit Soufriere, some of the roads going up to Castle Bruce and so on have been severely destroyed. When you leave Tarish Pit going towards Rosalie, where they call TFM, where
Mm-hmm.
Conrad Cyrus had his property, that area, I understand, is just a total disaster. Going as far as La Plaine, all of these areas. And in the midst of that, right in the midst of that, the prime minister comes on address the nation. Not about that, he addresses the nation to announce that he's going to have a snap election more than almost 3 years to when it was constitutionally due, because you have to add on whatever time because of when
That's right.
Parliament first sat and all that.
That's
So,
right.
so it's
Yeah.
like 3 years
Right.
constitutionally due. And
Almost.
I mean, the country was not in crisis. The government was not a coalition to say you have some people and one set get vexed and they wanted to pull out, so it forced an election. The normal things that usually would cause an early election. There were no set of, let's say, a lot of riots or protests, and so the government felt like it had to go and get a new mandate from the people. All of the usual reasons why a government might call an early election, none of those circumstances seem to be present. And so one of the first questions that needs to be asked, I don't know, I know we don't have the answer, but it would bring us towards a discussion, is why? Why was the country put through the trauma of an election
Well,
just
well,
2 years after a previous one?
well. It clearly a number of responses can be given to that. One is being insensitive, of course. One, intolerance. Another could be abuse of power. Um, um, that's how tyrants behave. That's the behavior of a tyrant. That's the behavior of a dictator. I mean, any one of these could be attributed to that type of behavior because clearly, as you said, it wasn't something that had to be done at that time, given the time frame that we have for an election. But when, again, as I said in my opening comments, that one play complete disregard toward democracy, then that's what happened. You have autocracy. You can either have autocracy, autocratic behavior, or a democratic behavior. And clearly that borders on an autocratic behavior type of leader. And I think too, we need to put that within certain contexts,
Right.
meaning that prior, or rather coming out of the last general election, that was in 2019, one of the vexing issues, as we refer to it, was the whole question of electoral reform. And the prime minister, upon swearing in his ministers of government and giving all his, fancy speeches, indicated that within the first 100 days of his administration, he would ensure that electoral reform is undertaken, and went on to advise that he would be appointing our eminent jurist, Sir Dennis Byron, first president of the CCJ, the Caribbean Court of Justice, as the sole commissioner to undertake that task. We know how much was paid and all that good stuff. And it was right on the eve of Sir Byron submitting a report with timelines saying when and how he's going to deliver on his assignment. But let me back up a bit. Even prior to Sir Byron's letter of November the 6th, the Prime Minister addressed the nation on our 44th anniversary of independence and advised the citizens of Dominica and the rest of the world who were listening to him on that day, and dealt and spoke on the matter of electoral reform. 3 days later, we had a letter from Sir Byron indicating where he is with his report and his assignment and implementation with specific timelines. Among the timelines that he gave was to present a report at the end of November. His letters dated 6 November, and he said by the end of November he would produce some report, and that come December he would deal with one of the major aspect of the reform that has to do with the register of electors, the electors list. I'm not sure if it's on this show, but on previous shows, I did indicate that the CCJ, who opined a position on electoral reform based on some petitions that were submitted before the courts from the last general election of 2019, it went to the local court, and the judge there threw it out. Justice Glasgow threw it out on the basis that there was not enough evidence. The matter was appealed to the OEC's Court of Appeal, and the OEC's Court of Appeal did not listen or did not determine the matter on the basis that the lower court had not arrived at a decision.
So I want to pause here and let people. A lot of people don't understand enough about what happened at the local level, because you spoke about democracy, and a big part of democracy is a functioning
Of the
judiciary
judiciary.
system. Okay.
Exactly.
Now there are some folks, some Dominican citizens who exercise their constitutional right to bring a matter that they thought was an injustice in front of the court, alleging that the party who won the seats. There were some seats that they shouldn't have won because they broke the law
Exactly.
in doing it. And so it was a matter of if you and I, if you commit a crime and I take you to court, but it's a crime against the state, the prosecutor for the state has a right to prosecute that case
To give you a hearing.
on behalf of the state and to
Natural
give you a
justice
hearing.
asks for that.
Right. So what the judge did, or the director of prosecutors did, from what I understood, is that he took over the case and said, I will prosecute the case.
Yes.
And so it's as if, let's say you have a young child and your child was abused by somebody, and you take that person to court. And so the director of the prosecutor, the main chief prosecutor in the country, says, I will prosecute that case on your behalf. And he took over that case, and what he did with it was to then turn around and say that I no longer wish to pursue
the
matter before the court.
That was the one before that. That happened. But I'm talking about the one where you had the 10 petitions coming out of the 2019 general elections
So
that
was
went before the High Court with the petitioners, the applicants were Glenroy Coffey, Dwayne Oswald George, and Affley Robin, against Melissa Skerritt, the chief elections officer, and a couple other persons, the Electoral Commission. And what happened there was that the judge felt, based on the petitions, there was not sufficient evidence to even give the petitioners a hearing.
So they did not even get a day in court.
Exactly. So he dismissed it. He threw it off. So as a result of that, they referred to the term, I'm trying to remember the term now, but in other words, the court did not arrive at a decision. Right. It wasn't heard, so it was thrown out.
Right.
So they appealed to the OECS Court of Appeal. And the OECF Court of Appeal now says, well, we can't determine something where there's not a decision. Kind of makes sense, yes, because there's no decision. What are we looking at? So the OECS Court of Appeal threw it out. And then they appealed to the highest court, which is the Caribbean Court of Justice. And that is where the Caribbean Court of Justice said, the justices said, although based on the petitions itself, that the OECS may not have had jurisdiction to determine the matter. However, given the severity of the matter, and this seems to be a matter that borders on constitutional, they had a constitutional right, if felt aggrieved, to go to the court. And as a result, the OECS had a right to listen, at least give them a hearing on the basis of their constitutional rights as citizens. And the CCJ looked at the matter in its entirety. They were not determining on the petitions per se, but as a result of the complaint arising out of a right to be heard. And in so doing, the CCJ made some scoffing comments, to the extent that they concluded the report by saying we should not go into another election.
That is the most important statement right there. Dominica should not go into
those were the words of the CCJ. And Tony, I live.
So Alvin, we are halfway through already. I don't want us to
lose time. I know, man. The time does go so quick.
We have to talk about going forward from the result of the election. But I think it was important to set that stage.
Right.
Because that sets the stage in which the Prime Minister of Dominica now, having all that weight of wind, headwind, let's say,
right,
from the highest court, from
observers report, OAS,
from people that he hired his own self, he hired them. Even in all of those circumstances, he basically, I don't know what, in Dominica we have a thing where we stick out our tongue and we say, bleh, he basically stick out his tongue at those people and say, you know what, I don't have to listen to you. And he goes ahead and calls an election. So let's fast forward to that.
And that,
I think
right,
we've established
right,
that
exactly.
circumstance.
And
Yeah.
that's why I'm saying that that is undemocratic.
Yes.
So we're
And
at this point now in Dominica, and I think that is where the conversation now has to go.
no,
So
no.
that,
Also, Alvin, before we go there, I want to spend maybe 2 minutes on that to say that because of the way he announced it, and with the amount of time in that he allowed for the elections, there are certain things that have to be put in place according to law for an election. And most important of it is the electors list.
but he don't care about that.
Right, but I'm saying that the fact that the electoral commission most likely did not have sufficient time in 30 days to meet the requirements of the law to conduct an election should have made that election illegal and illegitimate.
Yes.
That is my position on
No,
that.
you are absolutely correct. But again, bear in mind, Tony, that the prime minister seems to be the one that giving direction to the commission as well as to the president of the country, Charles
Okay, so
Savary.
the president has to act on his recommendation. It says he shall act on the on advice of the prime minister and in favor and how did all this like in favor of what the recommendation of the
Right.
prime minister is. But the electoral commission is supposed to be an independent body.
Absolutely. As far as Section 38 of the Constitution says that the Electoral Commission shall be the one responsible for the conduct of elections in the country.
And so
But
if the electoral commission knew that they did not have sufficient time to be able to organize an election. And secondly, there are places in Dominica that at that moment we had landslides and a lot of property damage. Some people definitely would have had difficulty getting to the polls. So,
yeah,
so there was ample reason for the Electoral Commission to say, Mr. Prime Minister, I know you have the right to issue a writ. However, 30 days is insufficient time for us to be able to conduct an election in accordance with the law.
let me disappoint you, Tony, to say that whatever you're saying there is what would happen in a democratic state. But unfortunately, we're not there. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Right.
We're not in a democratic state. So when you're not in a democratic state and it's autocracy, the tyrant, the boss calls the shot. There's no rule of law. There's no rule of law. There is no norms. There is no conventions. There's nothing like that. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
What you've just pointed out would happen in a real democracy. But unfortunately, we're not there. And that is why I'm saying that moving forward, we have to find a way to educate our citizens that this is where we are now. We are in a state where we are no longer operating within a democracy. And as a result, we now as a people have to ask ourselves, what do we do? What can we do to change where we are? We can't pretend that it's not happening. We pretend that we're in a democracy, but we are not. Because the whole question of rule of law is thrown out of the window. The judiciary is I just told you that the CCJ is like the Supreme Court here in the United States. And they said, do not do this. And the Prime Minister says, I don't give a D what you say. I'm going to call the elections.
And if you don't agree, chupu.
And if you agree, chupul. And I mean, even the letter from Sir Byron of November 6 clearly stated that he had consensus from the commission and they had agreed on everything. So it wasn't a question of just he indicating his position. He said there was agreement with the commission, which implied exactly what you said, that the commission was at the time in the process of putting the list together. The CCJ says that the electors list at section 83 of the report, the electors list is central to a legitimate or lawful election.
Or lawful election. Mm-hmm.
Those were their words, one sentence. The central list, the electors list is central to the legitimacy or lawfulness of an election.
And Alvin, just to say that people hear us talking about the CCJ and they think that, which stands for the Caribbean Court of Justice, they think that that is a foreign body that exists somewhere in the region that can hear cases and so on. But if you look at the structure of our government, the CCJ is part of our government.
But yes,
because our government is made up of the executive, which is the cabinet, I guess.
Right.
The parliament is the other one. Although in our
the legislature,
the legislature is
and
the parliament.
Executive.
Although in our arrangement, sometimes the legislature and the executive overlaps quite a bit, because the parliamentarians are also appointed as ministers.
That's right.
And so you have that overlap. But the third arm is the judiciary system, of which the highest court is the Caribbean Court of Justice.
That's right.
And so the Caribbean Court of Justice is part of the government or the governing structure of Dominica. So this is not coming from a foreign entity that's trying to interfere in our local. I think it's important to state that.
And also, Tony, without cutting you out, the CCJ, when the matter is determined at the CCJ level, it's not just one justice, that deliberates on the matter. As it relates to that specific report that was issued in July of this year, there were 5 justices. And we're not talking about anyone that just came out from law school yesterday, and practicing. These are esteemed jurists in the region that will look at a matter, that will deliberate, that will discuss, and arrive at a conclusion. And that was your conclusion.
And that was the conclusion.
But when you have
those judges, Alvin, not only do they adjudicate in the Caribbean, a lot of them have experience working in jurisdiction
international, like Sir Byron. Sir Byron worked internationally as well. And Sir Byron is saying to you, this is what we need to do, a course of action. But the tyrant says no. And the tyrant says chupul. And the tyrant says gatewas. And the tyrant used those terms. Civility has gone out. So that's what I think where we are, Tony, and for purposes of this discussion, how do we get our people? How do we bring across the message? The messaging now is going to be important, because what is happening is that the citizens of Dominica is saying that it's okay, give me $300, what they call it, cool out. Give me a $300 cool out. Give me a CO. Give me a house or whatever, and to hell with democracy. Do what you want.
Alvin, let me take a quick break. We are at 41 minutes after the hour.
It's amazing how the time flies.
When we come back, because so far we've been setting the stage.
Yes.
Setting the backdrop against which this election was called.
Right.
And therefore, hopefully, our viewers and listeners get an understanding as to why we think that I think that this election was illegal and illegitimate.
Undemocratic too.
And undemocratic. Because the only thing that you hear is that, the Prime Minister has a right to call the election whenever he feels like it. And Edison James called elections before the due date. And Miss Charles called elections before the due date.
There's no comparison.
But we want
Mm-hmm.
to say why this is uniquely atrocious.
Yes.
So we've set that stage and we've had the elections. Now we have to wonder what next. And so right after this commercial break, we're going to talk about what's in store for Dominica and the implications of what just happened.
Absolutely.
We'll be right back.
Presented by.
People say I've got a great smile. Well, I have to say, this is all thanks to the professional team at Beacon Dental Group right here in Dorchester, Massachusetts. I've got world-class dental care. Beacon Dental Group has expert and caring staff dedicated to providing the most advanced and satisfactory treatment in all aspects of oral health. Their services are designed to meet your needs and give you a perfect smile, too. General checkups, cosmetic surgery, Gemini laser service, and advanced procedures, all in a state-of-the-art facility. Call or visit Beacon Dental Group today, 1026 Blue Hill Avenue, Dorchester, Massachusetts, or call 617-282-2146 for a smile that lights the world.
If you live in Canada, the US, and the UK and are looking for Dominica products including cocoa sticks, bay rum, coffee, soaps, crafts, and other popular Dominica items, then look no further. You can now shop on BuyDominicaOnline.com, a secure, easy-to-navigate website selling a wide variety of Dominica-made and Dominica-inspired products. When you shop on BuyDominicaOnline.com, you are helping to grow Dominica's economy. Go to BuyDominicaOnline.com and enjoy home away from home.
Hey, hey, hey.
Hi, this is Rena Charles, aka Mystery.
Tune in on Saturday, 10th of December at 7 p.m.
Eastern Standard Time, 8 p.m. local
to
time.
get the best hot from Luscious
Talking Calypso, baby.
and how to sell cocoa sticks with Mystery
Cocoa for sale, cocoa for sale, cocoa for sale.
on your favorite show,
Dissect.
Dissect, with your host, novelist Angela.
Join us on TDN TV, YouTube, Facebook.
Big up.
I'll see you there.
So I want to say thank you. Thank you so much to the folks who sponsor us and collaborate with us. Man's Audiovisual, they do the graphic works for us, our flyers, some of our videos. You can check them out for your promotional needs. They can do as small as a flyer, and they can do a full-blown video production with post-production, where they can give you something that's edited, streaming live. Check out Man's Audio Visual for that. Beacon Dental has been our sponsor for years. We want to say good night to them. They actually, I'm my dentist. I will tell you, I drive all the way to Boston for dental care from Beacon. Buy online Dominica. We know Christmas is coming. So as you look to stuff the stockings of your loved ones, go to buyonlinedominica.com. Go early, because they do get authentic Dominican products from Dominica. So go there right now and order your Christmas goodies, your Christmas gifts, and so on from them. So thank you to the sponsors. Listeners, if you joined us a little late, my guest tonight on this weekend interview is Mr. Alvin Thomas. Alvin carried so many hats. But tonight, I think the more relevant one probably is he's the former General Secretary of the Public Service Union, the Dominica Public Service Union. He was permanent secretary for a while in Ministry of Tourism. He was Postmaster General in Dominica, and he's just an all-out community leader, community voice. Lots of experience in administration of the affairs of the country. More than qualified for this conversation that we're having tonight, because we're not having a political conversation, although I believe that everything is political, because in my mind, politics is the system in which you use to allocate resources and to manage the resources of the country. So who gets what we save, what we use, what we conserve, what we preserve. All of those decisions are, in my mind, political decisions, because the people you vote in charge, they make decisions that has consequences to those things. I want to welcome everybody who's viewing and looking at us. Ernie John Finn said many young people could not be registered on the night that the writ was due to the effects of the weather in the east of Dominica. So not only that people could not get to vote, even so many weeks later, but on that same night, because I think they probably had only 1 or 2 days or something like that, one day.
The law provides the law provides certain specific time frame between
Right.
issue of the writs and objections and register and all of that, and none of that were met. I
Yes,
mean,
none of
they
those things
just
were met.
they were just
Yeah. So
I mean,
this election was illegal. So
Yeah.
I mean, that's where I want to start, because we're going to talk about what are the implications. And I'll tell you, one of my disappointments in the whole process was that there was a total, well, in my mind, there was a total absence of the lawyers, of the people whose speciality should have come in and inform the public and listen to their concerns and answer and help take action in that regard. So what I mean by that is, when we had the corona pandemic, our doctors stepped up and gave information and helped design the system to deal with the coronavirus. And we had good results. To me, what just happened was a legal and political pandemic, or equivalent to that. And we did not see the same response from our folks in the legal profession. We just heard a very blase, well, there's nothing you can do once the writ is issued until after the elections, or whatever it is. I think they abdicated their role. And I'm saying that, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody who's in the profession, but they really, really abandoned.
I agree.
And I'm not saying that I expect them to come out and say, yes, the election can be stopped, or no, it cannot be stopped. I think there was just an absence of their presence to say, these are the options, this is why this can be so. Let's sit down, let's explore, let's listen, and so on. They were just completely, they just faded into the background. Complete failure.
I agree with you. And I personally felt that, given, as I said, what the CCJ said in their report was sufficient grounds, if I may use it as that, to present a matter before the courts and let them adjudicate on the matter.
Exactly.
Okay? Because, I mean, I just made a few passing comments on the report, but that report is very detailed and concise. But let me segue, as you say, as we move into the second portion of the discussion. And earlier on, you made reference to the three branches of government: the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. And we have, Tony, for our purposes as Dominicans, what is called a constitution. We have that piece of document called the Constitution. And everything that we are speaking about tonight, the elections, that falls under the Constitution, the Electoral Commission, Section 38, whatever. The president function as a president, that falls under the Constitution. All of those matters falls under what is called a constitution. And in the preamble of our Constitution, it starts off by saying the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Dominica, whereas the people of Dominica, the people, and there are 5 different areas. I'm going to read just 3. It says at C, have a certain dear belief in a democratic society in which all persons may, to the extent of their capacity, play some part in the institutions of the national life. Institution of the national life. So that entails the Electoral Commission, the judiciary, you name it. And does develop and maintain due respect for lawfully constituted authority. Earlier on, we asked whether the Prime Minister has a right to do what he did. Respect lawfully constituted authority. And then it goes on to say...
not just authority. Not just authority. Not just authority.
Lawfully constituted authority.
Exactly.
That's our Constitution.
Right.
And it goes on further to say, desire that your Constitution should make provision for ensuring the protection in the Commonwealth of Dominica of fundamental human rights and freedom. Now, therefore, the following provision shall have effect as the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Dominica. So the prime minister, folks say, have the right, but every right has a corresponding responsibility. You may
Legally
have the right.
constituted right.
You may have the right to discipline your child as a parent. That's your right. If the child does something wrong, to discipline the child, but you have to do so in a responsible manner. You know that, especially in the United States. If you act in a manner that is outside and not responsible, the cops will come pick you up and they'll take the kid away from you. Because in exercising that right to discipline the child, you did not exercise a certain level of responsibility. So the prime minister had a certain level of responsibility to exercise under the Constitution, and as well as the president and the Electoral Commission. And that is why I'm saying, Tony, it all goes back. Remember what we said in C, have asserted their belief in a democratic society in which all persons may, to the extent of their capacity, play some part in the institutions of national life. So again, Tony, where we are right now at this juncture, because what is to say, for example, we get electoral reform, and electoral reform is instituted, and the government happens to be still there, and the government say, to hell with electoral reform. I don't care what you reform, what new legislation you bring. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to call it and do as I want. So that's what I'm saying. It goes way beyond the whole discussion of electoral reform or just election. Yes, election is a critical part of a democratic system, the right to vote and the free and fair election. But
Right.
that is just one aspect of it.
Mhm.
So it brings us now to ask the question, how do we get our citizens engaged, especially our young people, to understand that, look, it's not just a CWO, it's not just a cool out, it's not just a mendicancy attitude of giving the guy a fish or giving her a fish and not learning to fish. This is where we are, unfortunately. And what have happened over the years, over the last 2 decades or so, this government has conditioned this populist mind that you can only survive if I have control of your mind, and anything, you don't have a mind of your own, and you can only survive based on what I say or do. I mean, just listen to the comments that were on their platform. One, they did not have a manifesto, which is a normal aspect of a campaign. Two, nothing discussed in terms of development. Is all kinds of, I don't even know how to describe it here, that came across. A minister saying who has gangs ready and they could send gangs in. Another one saying, I spying on you, watch your back, scratch my back. Another one saying, chupul. Another, I mean, that is the kind of level that we've gotten in. And I'm saying, how do we get out of that, Tony? That is going to be the challenge. How do we get out of that? How do we get our people sufficiently educated, informed, engaged, to be able to take part in the democratic process, in the electoral process, and all the things that make us a people, that makes us a citizen, that makes us who we are, our values, our norms? How do we get back to that level? Because right now, we are off the rails. We are off the rails, Tony.
So
And I don't even know, to be honest with you, sometimes I don't even know where to start, Tony.
so
But that has to be the discussion.
the thing about it is that we have to ask ourselves what kind of people we are, what kind of people we wish to be. And so I started the program by asking why the election. And we didn't get a clear-cut answer, but it probably the most plausible answer is that the prime minister had some dissent within his camp. Because what was the main outcome of the election? What was the main outcome of the election? The main outcome of the election was that there were folks who were elected that were boxed out. There were folks who were elected like Reggie Ostry and Blackmore and those people who were elected for 5 years. Okay, these people were elected for 5 years, and they are no longer part of parliament. As a matter of fact, the election was reported. Alvin, can you mute your mic for a minute, please? It was reported that it was dissent within the prime minister's camp that resulted in the snap election. And so the main result of the election is that you have the prime minister, just like Maya Motley did in Barbados, getting rid of folks who were starting to get a little bit of balls to challenge him. So what happens if, okay, he has a new set of people, and in 12 months' time, these people decide that they want to challenge him again? You heard him on the campaign trail. On the campaign trail, he said, oh, if these people are not performing, I am going to fire them. Okay? So if enough of them don't do what he thinks they should do, he's going to then turn around and call another election. Is that what's going to happen? And everybody is going to say, well, the prime minister has a right to call an election whenever he feels like it. That is not out of the realm, because if he calls the election to get rid of people that challenge him, people that went to the polls and won the elections, got a 5-year mandate from their constituency, and he feels that because they're challenging him, he has the right to just truncate that mandate that those folks had and call an election. What happens if some of those young people that he brings on are not as docile as those old heads that he had, and they decide to challenge him, and he say, you know what, these people more than I can handle, Mr. President, I want you to dissolve the House. Let's call another election.
Takes me back again to that question, Tony. I keep coming back to that question, because what based on what you're saying there, again, and based on the action that he took with respect to the former ministers, and we now as hopefully new ministers, is how tyrants behave. That's how dictators behave.
Exactly.
And that is what we have. So the same pattern he has within his party, he extends that to run in the country. I mean, can you tell me when was the last time the Dominica Labour Party had a delegates convention?
To choose delegates, exactly. Somewhere because somewhere around 2014 or so on.
Because that's the point. I mean, even the manner in which that the persons who are contesting are selected, it's not done in the manner that parties operate. Even, I mean, I dare say, I will even say for Mia Motley, I don't think she handpicked people like that. They have a conference, they have delegates, they have branches, and out of that, hopefully somebody will come out. She may have a final say.
Don't put your hand in fire for Mia Motley. Well, there's a whole bunch of leaders in the Caribbean that's bent on following the road that's scary.
Well, that is true. That is true. So but the point I'm trying to make is that this guy runs this thing
like it is shop.
Right. He runs this like a mob, a gangster, a dictator. I mean, you heard the prime minister on the platform say, my brother. I said, my brother.
Don't come for me,
Don't come for me, my brother. I mean, come on, Tony. I mean, this is stuff we did maybe when we were 10 years old, 15, youngsters, inexperienced, don't care. We're in high school or primary school. We behave that way, my brother.
Somebody
this is the prime minister of Dominica.
You want to fight?
Yeah, you want to fight? This is the prime minister of Dominica. But guess what? He's able to say that and get away with it because we do not have a democratic system. We do not run.
And so, Alvin, you asked how do we get out of it? How we get out of it how we get out of it is for the people who support the Labour Party. The people who support the Labour Party to expect more and better from their leader. To expect more and better from their party. Because Dominica, as we said, si ipani sutiwe, ipani vole. And so the Prime Minister feels empowered to do and say the things that he does and says, because he knows that the vast majority of his supporters don't care what he does, they support him anyway.
Well, that's part of the.
And that is where we have to start.
Well,
That is
yes,
where
but
we
that
have
is
to
just
start.
part of it, Tony, because I will tell you something. I read it some time ago where, say, for example, you condition, you take an animal, a wild animal, a dog or whatever monkey, you put it in a cage and you lock the cage and he keeps banging against the door. He can't get out. And he does that for a period of five years or whatever, let's say.
Yeah, okay.
And then after you open the door, you know he's not going to go out.
Yeah,
The door is wide open because he's conditioned. The mind is conditioned
it's
that,
more comfortable for him to stay in
that
that
he's not
familiar
going to come
setting.
across and bang against that door anymore.
Right.
And no matter what you do, that wild animal is not going to get out because they have. So over the years, this person's mind have conditioned. And that is why I am saying our part of our only hope now is to find a way to educate our young people. It's going to be a very difficult process, but I think it's a process where we have to start. And in this era of social media, like we're doing now, we have Facebook, we have Snapchat, I'll give you an example. A couple months ago, I was looking at a news item on CBS, I think it was. And there was this young guy who was showing his grandmother, who was maybe 70, almost 80, how to use TikTok. And guess what they was doing, Tony? She was relaying the story of the Nazis when the Jews were being persecuted. Because young people today they may not understand that story. That's foreign to them.
So
and he was teaching her to use TikTok. You could maybe Google, you might find that story. I think it was on CBS or NBC.
Right.
And she was relaying the story.
Marshall Lawrence says that you have to deal with finance reform. A lot of countries say that the way to deal with it is finance reform. That is
an aspect. Yes, I agree. That all that falls under the
another
electoral
listener
reform.
says it's not because you have the right to do something that you should do it.
Right.
I agree with that. Another person said the Prime Minister called the election just because of self-preservation, putting his own interests above the interests of the country. And we know all of those things are correct.
Dictator tendency. That's a tendency of a dictator.
But Alvin, another thing I want to bring up is that I talk about labor rights demanding better and holding and expecting a higher standard from the Prime Minister and their party. But a big aspect of what was revealed in the 30 days from the announcement to the elections is the lack of, I don't know, organizing ability, organizing capacity, vacuum of leadership. I mean, I know the United Workers' Party was right in transition in leadership, but quite outside of that, folks who were trying to organize themselves, to make a case and to deal with it and oppose or at least delay the elections, they were just floundering.
Well,
so there is that vacuum of leadership.
Absolutely.
Generally in the community. So the reason I'm bringing that up because you're talking about education, okay? And I agree. But there has to be like leadership training, leadership education. We have to find a way to give some basic life skills to our young people. When I say life skills, I mean skills so that they can think for themselves. And that kind of a thing. I think education is the key. But it has to be deliberate. And we have to do it outside of the establishment.
No, you're right. You're absolutely correct. I mean, Tony, you and I are a product of JCs, Dominica JCs, and we know what certain life skills we learned as young men in that organization. And there are many other organizations that at the time provided that for young people. The school curriculum and the kind of discussions we had. I'm not even sure there are debates in schools anymore. I remember as a young man going to the St. Mary's Academy, we had regular debates among the various schools. But you are absolutely correct. And you see, that's what happened when a society decays. And we move now from a democratic society to an autocratic society. Everything else falls apart. Because like you mentioned earlier, the Bar Association, quite apart from the individual attorneys are fearful to have challenged this matter in the courts or to take a position on it. You didn't hear anything coming out from the Bar Association. You didn't hear anything coming out from the churches to say, well, hey, guys, hold up, hold up, hold up. This kind of language that is being used on the platform, especially coming from a leader, the prime minister, is inappropriate. I didn't hear one. Maybe there was one, but I didn't hear one. When you refer to a former member of parliament as a gatewas, you know what a gatewas means. We know. So you don't have that.
And he referred to somebody who, one of the independent candidates for Granby, as a mush.
As a mush, yes, lies. and I mean, when you hear a prime minister say, oh, get up in the morning, you don't have to wash your face, even if last in your eyes, go and vote for me, even if there is last in your eyes. I mean, what kind of language are we into in this society, in this culture we growing up? I mean, where are we? I mean, everything has just broken down. And you're absolutely correct. There's a lack of leadership, not coming forward in the business sector, not coming forward as eloquently and as vocally within the labor movement or in general, not coming from the churches. I mean, I would have thought that there would be a statement coming from the Council of Churches calling for a certain level of civility in the conversation. So this is where we are. And all of that have happened over the years. It didn't just happen because, bear in mind, Roosevelt Skerrit, Prime Minister Skerrit's been there for a little while. So he has conditioned the people's minds. He has conditioned them to be like that, to think like that. So therefore, he can do that. So our democracy is derailed. And I'm saying now, to save this country moving forward, we have to find a way to take back our democracy. And it's not going to be easy. I'll be the first one to admit it's not going to be easy, Tony. But I believe that if we keep at it, if we structure the message in a manner that folks could understand, that we can relate to the people, we can use. And you and I, when we were growing up 15, 20 years ago, we didn't have WhatsApp and smartphone and chat phone and all this kind of stuff. Okay. I remember in my early years in the CSA Center, you know, we stayed up all night with a guest in a photocopier making newsletters like this and turning that all night on a stencil. And you type this on a stencil, and then if you make a mistake, you have to get the sort of pink correcting fluid to correct the stencil and then put it back again. Today, you can do a newsletter in one night. Tonight, you and I can maybe do 1,000, 2,000 newsletters easily on the computer.
And it's not messy.
It's not messy. Yeah. So the point I'm trying to make is that we have now the technology that would enable us to educate the masses, to get onto a campaign. For example, the Constitution. That is something maybe a group in Dominica, either for the churches, the Bar Association,
well,
the union.
Don't mention the lawyers, you know, because
somebody to take the Constitution and explain it to us. Have a session on the Constitution. Have a 3, 4, 5-part series on the Constitution, what it means, what it doesn't mean, what it is, you know, that kind of thing. Start in the schools. So the young person coming out from the high school, going to college, will understand the benefit or the significance of his Constitution.
Understand their rights.
Their rights. So when he goes to vote now, he knows, you know, this politician can't come and speak nonsense to me. That's my right.
So Alvin, the answer then is, as you mentioned, is education. And because the government is in control, of the education system, it might not be through the Marshall Lawrence is saying something. Let me see what he says. He says, guys, my comment is in reference to getting more persons participating in the electoral process if they see a more equal platform. Well, he's absolutely correct, and that fits exactly what we're saying. That if we educate folks and give them the confidence and the understanding, more importantly, of what their rights are, what their privileges are, what their responsibilities are. They will put themselves up for leadership. Didi Easter is saying Scary took a gamble, calling a snap election, and has lost. His psyche cannot handle the reality of the moment, that he has been repudiated by the Dominican people. He is embarrassed, humiliated, and scared, quite likely because he knows he is facing serious charges once he leaves office.
Well. Just to make a comment on the first comment by Marshall, he's right.
Mhm.
But however, if that equal platform does not exist, what do we do to enable it to exist?
Right.
That's the
So
point.
that's
If it
what
does not
so
exist, then what do we do?
But the point he was making was that if and when we tackle election financing. So for example, I had one of the independent candidates on my show. What was his name? Not Antoine. What do we call him? Flacco. He was on there, Tyrone. And the war chest is different. And so even though he is very articulate and clearly resourceful in terms of his ability and his skills, especially on such short notice, he cannot compete on the level, say, to go buy a public address system, buy
Let me
fuel to go around the
yeah.
country. And so I think that is what he
Yes,
was referring to.
but let me push back on that a bit, because as I said earlier, you can have all the legislations that you want in place. And if you have a dictator running your country, everything else means nothing.
None of that will matter. Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Mhm.
Democracy is it. If you can have all the laws. Let me give you a classic example. In 1993 or whatever, I don't remember the exact date, but you have on the statute book what is called Integrity in Public Office Act. And what that act was meant to do was to ensure that persons who are in public office operate on a certain level of integrity, so no corruption. Okay, the act was passed, and it took a whole 2 or 3 years before it was implemented, before regulations were developed for the act. The act was the commission, the Integrity Commission, comprised of 7 members: a president, a person from the accounting, a person with legal background, one person appointed by the leader of the opposition, recommended, one from government side, then the president appointed the chairman. 7-man team, legal and what have you. I don't have it ahead of me, but that's it, 7. Okay. The first or the second meeting that they had, a matter was brought before the commission as it relates to the prime minister and some villa. I don't know if you recall that. Some villas, they say yard and all of that. And that created a big stir in the commission. You could go back and Google it too. You'll see the exchanges that took place at the time on the commission. You know what the prime minister did? He went into parliament after that. He amended the act and he reduced it from 7 to 3. And the 3 would be the chairman, one person nominated by the opposition, and one person on the government side. So it moved from 7 to 3. And since then, we know how much property and assets the prime minister has acquired. And the law is there, the act is there, it has no teeth. So the point I'm saying is that you can have the finance, the electoral reform finance and all that good stuff that we need. The question remains, will it just be on the books or will we be able to implement it? Because even under the current Regulations of Electors Act that currently governs the elections, Section 17 of the Act clearly stipulates how the list should be conducted for purposes of elections. The last general election of 2019, and that is what even the Justice Glasgow made that reference. He made the reference at Section 129 of his summation that sections, there appeared to be a patent non-compliance of Section 17 of the Act. In layman words, he was saying that Section 17 was not applied lawfully. That was in 2019. The CCJ supported that view and said that, yes, they support the view that there appeared to be a patent non-compliance. And as such, this matter is so serious that if nothing else is done, assuming that nothing else is done, that this matter has to be looked into. The point I'm trying to make is that even on the laws now, they violated Section 17 of the Regulations of Electors Act. So when you have a society where the democratic principles and values has been eroded, it doesn't matter how much law you put. It doesn't matter how much act you put. It doesn't matter how much reform you put. Let's get to the root of the problem, the cancer, which is our democracy is being threatened. And what do we do to educate the masses, the people, starting with the young or whoever it is, to take our democracy back? So you don't have what is taking place now with this Skerrit-led administration or any other administration for that matter.
No,
that's the challenge.
That is the challenge. And of course, we have to go back to education. And what I was starting to say is that the education doesn't necessarily have to be in a classroom.
Exactly.
As you said, you and I were members of Dominica JCs. I grew up in organizations. Most of what I learned is from organizations. In primary school, I was in the 4-H club.
That's
in
right.
Secondary school, I was in Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme. In college, I was in fraternities. When I came back from college, I was Dominica JCs. And so those organizations provide avenues for folks to learn to interact with each other, following rules and laws and understanding what are your rights under the constitution of that organization, and being able to make a point based on the organization and stand up for your right and what are your privileges and all of that. You get used to following rules of an organization and making it work to get what you want.
And just to stick a pin there, the Prime Minister Skerrit said, no law, no constitution will prevent him from doing what you want. You remember that statement?
Right. And I'm saying that if enough folks, if the 4-H club movement, if all the other civic organization movements were more popular, that statement would have meant more to more people, and we would have gotten more significant pushback.
Yep.
Because then we would understand. Augustine Saint we say the struggle continues.
Absolutely.
Giving up is not an option.
That is true.
Education is the key to make informed decisions. When electing our leadership, there is no true democracy, but we must maintain our integrity. Integrity is a key word, because when labor rights hear their prime minister say certain things on the platform, they should realize that this man is representing them. He is speaking on their behalf, and therefore, by not pushing back, you are saying that you condone the way he's representing you.
And I even think, Tony, we have to get away from tagging people too, like labor rights, UWP-ite, freedom-ites, that-ites. I think we need to get back to civility now again, and even the persons who may be supporting the Labour Party, to say to them, well, hey, Tony, I know you're supporting the Labour Party, but this is not the right thing to do. This is not the right way to go about it. I mean, because what has happened over the last several years, and we saw it so distinct in this elections, I mean, is like a tribalism. I mean, our country is so small, a population of no more than 70,000 people, and so be tribalized like that. I mean, this is crazy. I mean, if you ask me, we are all related. You just have to speak to somebody and realize, besides my cousin, and Mr. Grandmother and my grandmother are first cousins or something like that.
In close relations,
too,
but it comes right back to education.
I agree.
It's because it is more difficult.
Yeah.
It is more difficult to influence people in a direction they don't want to go if they are more educated and more aware.
Yeah. Well, I give the example of the cage.
I think the key to this is education. That's the key word. And education, not in a sense, until we get to it, and where it can be incorporated into our school curriculum, we have to find ways of engaging our folks in such ways that they can understand what it feels like to exercise your right. Start in small ways and get them feel a feeling for it. And once they get a taste for it, because it's not by accident that dictators dismantle social organizations.
And it happens over time. It's not something that happens
exactly
just a month or 2 years ago. It builds up.
Want you to belong to their organization, the women's arm of their party, the men's movement in their party, the youth movement in their party, this and that, and so they can control your messaging and your involvement.
And your mind.
We have to give people more options in terms of how to learn to relate with each other. It comes back to what you say, that we even if you support the Labour Party and I support United Workers Party, we have to be able to understand when that is important,
coexist,
and when we need to put that aside for common good. And so that is where we have to go. We're approaching 9:30. Let's do a stop at 9:30. So I'm going to. So we need to start. Go ahead.
No, but I'm sure, and that is why I commend you and the management and the team at TDN for what you guys are doing, because let us not underestimate you see all the comments that our listeners and those who are tuning in are making. Very valuable comments, very, very, very valuable observation and comments. And all of that is part of that process. Like you say, it don't necessarily have to be only in the school system, but we have at our disposal now, more than ever before, the tools and the technology to make things happen. Look what happened in the as a result of COVID. Folks believed before that you had to travel to another destination to have a meeting or to work or to do this. Look what COVID does. Zoom now is everything. Everybody does meeting by Zoom. Companies have cut in by half their travel budget because they can now conduct the same conference via Zoom. People work from remote, work from home. You're in China and you're in Dominica working, or you wherever it is. And so the point again is that we have at our disposal the tool, the technology to disseminate the information. If you want to call it the propaganda, if you want to call it the mind framing, the mind changing, we have that at our disposal. And what we need is to have more like yourselves and others to come to the fore and help educate the process. And I think, if you ask me, a starting point would be to start with our young people. And that is not saying so in any sort of bias or discrimination way, but they're the ones. You think of a young man that was what, 10 years maybe when this government came into office, is now what, 30? You see what I'm talking about? 30.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they were 10-year-old or 9-year-old. And for the last 20 years, all they knew was this Labour Party and behaving in the manner with saying the things that they've been saying. And this young man now is 30 years, almost 40 just now. So we got to find a way to reach out to these young folks, to speak with them, to have focus group, to have those groups. You've made a very important point, the fact that leadership is missing or absent. But like one of the folks said, we can't give up the fight. We have to continue.
Exactly.
And I think the bigger picture, I will say, and it's just it's just where I see it, is that our democracy, what makes us as a people, this whole question of democracy is so embracing. That is off the rail now. And we got to bring it back into rail. We got to bring it back.
No, that Angela Allen says, nice discussion, brothers. Education calls books on the ground.
Books. Yeah.
But Alvin, we're approaching. I indulge your time for an extra half hour.
No, that's fine. That's fine. You know, one of the tenets in our JCI creed is what? One of my best tenets in my creed is what?
Service to humanity is the best work of life. I don't know if that is one you want.
Well, that is mine. You take mine. You stole mine. Service
I'm
to
saying
humanity is the best work of
best work
life.
of life. Yep.
And we know exactly what that means.
And it also says government should be of laws and not of men.
Oh my
You
God, I'm
know,
telling you.
because the laws worked.
Oh yeah.
You know, it worked for 20 years, for 20 years before we got this scoundrel in office.
Yeah.
And so the law can work as long as you have people who are willing to play by the rules.
But
But we have to,
in the absence of law, Tony, what you have? The Wild West.
exactly.
No rules.
But when you get folks who are willing to put the laws aside for their own personal gain, we have to shore up the laws to protect us from that. Alvin, I want you to close. I want you to close. Let's, if you have it in you, let's end on a positive note.
I always do. I always do, Tony. I always do. And like I always say, I'm a person of hope. I think there are better days ahead of us. I think we are better people than that. I believe so. I strongly believe so. That the better personliness is there, and it's just a matter of how do we bring it out, how do we share it with others, and how do we, like we say, service to humanity is the best work of life. So I think I'm hopeful. I believe, Dominica is still a very young nation, just celebrated 44 years. It would be nice if we give ourselves a target and say, well, 6 years from now, we would be celebrating 50 years as an independent nation. What is it we would like to see ourselves 6 years from now when we celebrate 50? So maybe we might want to collaborate with a few other folks and say, well, okay, what kind of vision we're going to plot for the next 6 years to take us into our 50th, half a century, and how do we implement it? So I'm optimistic, but I think though we have to recognize what is facing us. That recognition has to come about. What is facing us? Let's not pretend. And you said it quite well too, that si pani sutiwe pani vole, silence is complicity. If you're silent, you're complicit. So there's no room for silence anymore. And I think each of us, in our little, we can do something. Trust me. The little that each of us do collectively, we can address, whatever that big elephant in the room is like. So again, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to have that kind of conversation with my folks back home in Dominica and those listening in the diaspora as well. So certainly, I look forward to another such discussion.
Thank you for that, Alvin. I was going to read
I saw it.
Last comment.
Okay, look at
Political tribalism is evident in Dominica society. This is why political arguments these days often degenerate into outrage and animosity. People feel as if their identities are under attack when their politics are attacked. And so again, we talk about being able to teach people how to relate to each other. And Alvin, you one of the most important things that you say is that to piggyback on what one of the viewers said, let's not give up. And so we can only give up if we think that our actions would be useless, because then we feel hopeless.
Absolutely.
But you said that every little thing that we can do counts. And so if what I can do is once a week come on This Week in Interview and share ideas with my listeners, I do that. If what you can do is talk to your neighbor, I do that. If what you can do is donate a shirt to somebody who needs it, and therefore you develop a relationship where you can have a rapport, anything whatsoever that you can do. The other thing that you said that sparked something in me a minute ago, you talk about 50 years from now, 6 years from now, when Dominica is 50 years old, what vision do we have? So, can we use the technology and create a vision board and give people the opportunity to go on that board and write on that
It's a great
board
idea.
three things that they would like to see having achieved, ideally in Dominica in 50 years. I mean, I know everybody who knows me know my number one will be that Skerrit is no longer Prime Minister of Dominica. but you never mind me. Never mind me. I have strong.
I don't think we can go that much longer with that boy. With him.
I have strong opinions. So, but that doesn't have to be yours. Yours can be anything. Just let's see how we can create a digital vision board and have it somewhere where folks can go. You can do it anonymously, or you can put your name on it. I think that's a project that we can do for 2023.
I just wanted to say quickly though, Tony.
What the vision?
Yeah, I know we didn't go too much in the elections or anything like that, but look at what happened in Salisbury. When the people of Salisbury decide collectively, we're going to take a position.
Yeah.
And we know what happened. We don't need to go into it. That's for another discussion at some other time. But look what happened.
And
a leader step forward and say, hey, I don't think you can come in our community unless you do X, Y, and Z. And I'm telling you straight up, don't show up. And look what happened. You see the effect of action?
Exactly.
You see what action caused?
Is a new start.
They didn't even go in Makushri or Kulibishri or anywhere close, you know. They went all the way down Vickers to launch the Salisbury candidate.
They almost go Mary Gallant.
Almost go Mary Gallant. So that's the point I'm making. If enough of us are assertive, and it was done without any violence.
Yes.
There was no violence, there was nothing, but you had a leader come forward on behalf of his people and collectively say, no, you're coming in, you're not welcome. And that's the point I'm making. We can have more villages like that. It's not unique to Salisbury. We can. We can have that replicate itself throughout the country. Yes. It requires boldness. It requires courage. It requires not being afraid, understanding your rights. That's what it takes. So I want to commend my brother Hector John, if he's listening, to commend him for that leadership that he's provided for his people of Salisbury. Keep up the fight, Hector. Keep up the fight. You have our fullest support out here in the diaspora.
Yeah, certainly. And Alvin, I want to tell you thank you for agreeing to come on. Thank you for the listeners who stayed with us. I want to wish everyone a great week. And as you said, draw inspiration from the leadership of Hector in Salisbury. And folks, let's not give up. Let's really decide what kind of country that we need to have, and really what it will take to get it there. It's not as difficult as we may imagine. All we need is a start. And then once momentum is a very powerful thing. Once we get momentum, we will take it there. So I want to say good night, folks. Good night. Thank you so much to the producers and the folks in the background. Alvin, you too. Appreciate you coming on and having this discussion. Anytime. I think we had a really, really great discussion tonight. And folks, let's do this again next week, Wednesday. Another episode of This Week in Interview. I want to say good night to you and enjoy the rest of the week. Have a great weekend. Good evening.